Is your classroom a machine or a living ecosystem? For decades, we've kind of treated digital learning environments like vending machines. You drop the content in, press a button, and supposedly learning just drops out the bottom. But obviously, humans don't work that way. In this explainer, we're going to completely rethink that instrumental approach. We're going to look at some fascinating new research that asks us to throw out that machine metaphor entirely, and instead view our classrooms as living, breathing digital ecology.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're focusing on a massive pedagogical shift happening right now in higher education, particularly in the humanities. We're exploring recent scholarship that conceptualizes the classroom as a dynamic, co-constitutive system. This involves human actors, digital infrastructures, and institutional practices all interacting together. Whether you're an educator, a student, or just someone fascinated by how technology shapes learning, understanding this ecological framework will fundamentally change how you look at a digital syllabus.
So here's our roadmap for today. We'll start by unpacking the digital classroom illusion. Then redefine classrooms as living systems. After that, we'll look at the real-world roadblocks in power, platforms, and friction, examine the equity dimension, and finally wrap up with designing ecological pedagogies. All right, let's jump straight into part 1, the digital classroom illusion. Take a look at the stark contrast between these two models. The prevailing view in higher ed right now is what we call the instrumentalist model. That's the idea that technology is just a neutral tool used merely to deliver content. Think of it like a digital chalkboard. It just sits there holding facts while you project information onto it. But the research we're diving into says, well, that's entirely insufficient. Instead, they propose the ecological model. In this framework, learning environments are dynamic, co-evolving systems. The tech isn't just a passive pipeline. It literally changes the nature of the information itself and the people interacting with it. It transforms the very fabric of how a class operates.
Moving right along to part 2, classrooms as living systems. This whole idea is grounded in a crucial concept called technogenesis. Coined by scholar N. Catherine Hales back in 2012, technogenesis is the co-evolutionary dynamic where human cognitive capacities and technical systems mutually shape one another over time. I really want to emphasize that phrase, mutually shape one another. The digital tools we use in the humanities, whether that's a massive digital archive, text mining software, or an online discussion forum, they aren't just external objects. They actually alter how we think, how we read, and how we interpret. We shape the technology, and the technology actively wires our cognitive and interpretive practices right back.
Building on that co-evolutionary idea, the research pinpoints 5 core dimensions that characterize a truly successful digital humanities ecology. First up is interdependence. No part of the system, not the platform, the instructor, or the student, acts in isolation. A change in one affects the whole system. Second is adaptive capacity, meaning the classroom can flexibly respond and evolve based on how students are actually engaging, rather than sticking to a rigid predetermined path. Third is niche differentiation. Just like in a real forest, understanding that different tools support different types of intellectual growth. Fourth is sustainability, creating learning systems that last over time without burning everyone out. And finally, equity, making sure all parts of the ecosystem have the necessary conditions and resources to truly flourish. And hey, this isn't just high-level theory. Look at this direct quote from a literary studies instructor interviewed in the study. She says she created a living system in which the digital archive, the discussion platform, and the in-person seminar were each elements of a larger whole whose character emerged from their interaction. This is a fantastic, real-world example of ecological reflexivity in practice. She didn't view her class as separate physical and digital components competing for attention. She deliberately designed a living system where everything fed into everything else. The character of the class emerged entirely from their interactions. That is the ecological model in action.
Which brings us to section 3. Power, platforms, and friction.
Now, this idealistic living system runs into some real trouble when we look at the actual platforms universities use. The researchers found a massive disconnect here. Look at this comparison. On one side, Standard Learning Management System, or LMS, discussion forums operate on a transactional logic. They isolate individual contributions. You know the drill. Log on, post your mandatory 200 words, reply to a classmate for the grade, and log off. But on the other side, ideal humanities inquiry requires a dialogic logic, meaning sustained, complex, interpretive exchange that builds over time. The very architecture of standard digital platforms is actually working directly against the deep learning humanities instructors are trying to cultivate. This clash leads right into what researchers call institutional friction. If you've ever felt totally stifled by a rigid grading module or a clunky university portal, you've felt this firsthand. Instructors might genuinely want to build beautiful, adaptive digital ecologies, but they're often forced to use top-down, university-mandated LMS platforms. Add in heavy workloads with absolutely no time to build complex environments from scratch, and rigid assessment structures that only value measurable transactional outputs over exploratory learning. It's a profound clash between ecological aspirations and institutional realities.
To fully understand the power dynamics at play, the study points to critical scholarship, like this insight from Neil Selwyn. He notes that educational technology discourse systematically understates the structural inequalities, institutional constraints, and power relations that condition digital access. It's a critical perspective reminding us that technology adoption is never just a neutral administrative decision. Governance, institutional policies, and algorithmic structures heavily dictate who gets to succeed and what pedagogical possibilities are even allowed to exist in the first place.
Let's shift to Section 4, the equity dimension. Any biologist will tell you that to understand an ecosystem, you have to look at its most vulnerable parts. The researchers found that successful instructors practice something called critical care. This means making deliberate pedagogical efforts to design digital environments that don't just reproduce existing inequalities. It's the profound acknowledgement that simply handing a student a login to a platform does not mean they have equal access to the learning experience. An ecological approach means actively caring for the human elements of the system, ensuring that digital access and essential literacies are fully supported for everyone, not just the students who are already well-resourced.
The research gets incredibly specific about the realities of the digital divide. Drawing on post-colonial digital humanities scholarship, the study details how the benefits of digital platforms are often unevenly distributed. True engagement is heavily shaped by factors like socioeconomic status, race, gender, and geography. Think about it. A student navigating a dense digital archive on a shared mobile phone is in a fundamentally different learning ecosystem than one using a high-speed laptop. An ecologically sound classroom has to actively mitigate these factors, recognizing that if we blindly deploy technology without critical care, we can easily exacerbate systemic educational inequalities.
Finally, we arrive at Section 5, Designing Ecological Pedagogies.
So how do we actually pull this off? The study gives humanities educators a practical, actionable survival guide. Step 1. Design for systemic interactions. Don't just tack a digital tool onto an existing syllabus. Deliberately map out how that online archive interacts directly with your in-person discussions. Step 2. Develop ecological literacy rather than just basic tool proficiency. It's not about memorizing which buttons to click. It's about helping students understand how the platform itself secretly shapes their learning and discussions. And Step 3. Address structural inequities through mindful design. You always have to ask, who is this platform leaving behind, and ensure your projects can be completed even on a low-bandwidth internet connection.
And here is a vital point for any educator currently feeling burnt out: sustainability. The research explicitly warns against the trap of constantly chasing the newest tech novelty. A resilient digital ecology is fundamentally built on temporal sustainability. You are way better off investing your time developing deep, adaptive expertise with a small number of reliable tools, rather than perpetually exhausting yourself and your students by adopting every single new digital affordance that hits the market. Deep roots make for a much stronger ecosystem.
We've covered a lot of ground today, moving from the illusion of the instrumental machine to the vibrant reality of living, breathing digital ecologies. So, I want to leave you with a final, provocative thought. In the face of institutional friction, complex power dynamics, and rigid platforms, how will you cultivate the digital niches within your own learning ecosystem? The tools might be digital, but the environment is very much alive. It's up to you how it grows. Take a moment to think about your own ecosystem. Thanks for exploring this with me today.